Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back to the live studios here in Wisteria Cottage. And we've actually changed the name. It's going to be called Wisteria College because there's so much education going on here in the spiritual sense. So we're here with a team of preachers from So Street who are Doyle Moore is here, Bhakta Sam is here. We've got Matt, from brand new, hot off the press, hot off the skittle, and he's getting so fired up. He's texting his people back in Houston and already building up, a team, to preach. It's amazing what's going on over here. So we've changed it to Wisteria College rather than Wisteria Cottage. So, and we have Radharaman, the sage among sages. He's the one who lives in the cave and comes out every once in a while down to the, human society to give us the wherewithal of what's going on in spiritual life. And it's cool. It's like a cool bunch of guys over here. So, welcome to all of you out there in cyberspace. I hope you're enjoying this wonderful experience of hearing Srimad-Bhagavatam every day and the reflections of all these wonderful souls who gather around to hear Srimad-Bhagavatam. Because according to the Bhagavatam itself, you can't hear properly unless you're in the association of serious devotees, pure devotees who want to hear, who like to hear. So congratulations to all of you out there who have signed up. There's 900 of you out there now who are followers. You're not always there for every night, that's okay. But that's how many people have signed up to be followers of this fan page. Thank you so much. And don't forget, sharing means caring, and caring means sharing. So keep sharing with your friends. Spread this nectar. We're doing a revival here. It's a revolution. Reviving the taste of reading Srila Prabhupada's books, putting Srila Prabhupada squarely back in the center of his movement by putting his books and reading his books squarely in the center of the movement. Thank you very much. Before we start, we're going to continue our vow to read Sanatana Goswami's profound, beautiful, deep glorification of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, and by hearing it every night and studying it, it will help our depth of understanding and our taste. It's Srimad-Bhagavata Mahima Stotram. It's from the Sri Krishna Lila Stava, written by Srila Sanatana Goswami, and he is the senior disciple of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He heard from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu directly for a longer period of time, solidly at one time, than anybody else. So Rupa Goswami considers him his spiritual master. That's how deep he is. So his glorification of the Srimad-Bhagavatam goes like this. Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha Sarva Vedaika Satpalam Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabhu Kali Dvandodita Ditya Sri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshak Sharayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. I'll repeat that again for our pleasure. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin, Madguro Mad Mahadana, Madnistadaga Mad Bhagya, Mad Anandanamostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy. I bow down to you. Asadu, sadhu tadayin, atini chochatakada, hanamunchagadachin mam, premna rit kantayospura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, Vidura is finishing his conversation with Uddhava, in which he went into a reverie of remembrance of Krishna, because Vidura had left the palace in Hastinapur and was traveling all over, and he wasn't aware of the results of the Battle of Kurukshetra or of Krishna's departure and the departure of the Yadu dynasty. So he's at the end of his answering the question from Vidura, how are all my friends and relatives? Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 4, Text 21. My dear Vidura, I am now mad for want of the pleasure of seeing him. And just to mitigate this, I am now proceeding to Badrik Ashram in the Himalayas for association, as I have been instructed by him. Purport. A pure devotee of the standard of Uddhava constantly associates with the Lord in the double perception of simultaneous separation and meeting. The pure devotee is not for a moment unengaged in the transcendental service of the Lord. Execution of the Lord's service is the main occupation of the pure devotee. Uddhava's separation from the Lord was unbearable, and therefore he started to Badrik Ashram in obedience to the Lord's order, because the order of the Lord and the Lord himself are identical. As long as one is engaged in the execution of the order of the Lord, there is no factual separation from him. (22) There in Badrik Ashram, the personality of Godhead, in his incarnation as the sages Nara and Narayana, has been undergoing great penance since time immemorial for the welfare of all amiable living entities. Purport. Badrik Ashram in the Himalayas, the abode of Nara-Narayan sages, is a great place of pilgrimage for the Hindus. Even up to the present, hundreds and thousands of pious Hindus go to pay respects to the incarnation of Godhead Narayan. I mean, we must be doing something right because these pilgrims are, floating in from outer space. Dayalnitai and Radhananda, Devi Dasi, his better half, have just walked in the door from somewhere, somehow. Here, come sit here. Come sit here. Wow. A first. Well, thank you. I don't deserve it, but I'll take it anyway. Please. You can sit down, you can stand up, you can do whatever you like to do. I won't repeat everything I've just said. You're just going to have to plug in. Okay? Purport. Bhadrik Ashram in the Himalayas, the abode of the Narayan sages, is a great place of pilgrimage for the Hindus. Even up to the present, hundreds and thousands of pious Hindus go to pay respects to the incarnation of Godhead, Narayana. It appears that even 5,000 years ago, this holy place was being visited by such a holy being as Uddhava. And even at that time, the place was known to be very, very old. This particular pilgrimage site is very difficult to visit for ordinary men because of its difficult situation in the Himalayas, in a place which is covered by ice almost all year. For a few months during the summer season, people can visit this place at great personal inconvenience. There are 4 dhams, or kingdoms of God, which represent the planets of the spiritual sky, which consists of the Brahmajyoti and the Vaikunthas. These are Bhadrik Ashram, Rameshwara, Jagannath Puri, and Dwarka. Faithful Hindus still visit all these holy places for perfection of spiritual realization, following in the footsteps of devotees like Uddhava. You notice that Vrindavan and Navadvip, Mayapur are not mentioned because they're in Goloka Vrindavan. They're above Vaikuntha. Text 23. Sri Shukadeva Goswami said, after hearing from Uddhava all about the annihilation of his friends and relatives, the learned Vidura pacified his overwhelming bereavement by dint of his transcendental knowledge. Shall I repeat that one? This is a good one. Sri Shukadeva Goswami said, after hearing from Uddhava about all about the annihilation of his friends and relatives, the learned Vidura pacified his overwhelming bereavement by dint of his transcendental knowledge. Purport. Vidura was informed that the result of the Battle of Kurukshetra was the annihilation of his friends and relatives, as well as the destruction of the Yadu dynasty, and also the passing away of the Lord. All these hurled him into bereavement for the time being, but because he was highly advanced in transcendental knowledge, he was quite competent to pacify himself by enlightenment. As it is stated in the Bhagavad Gita, due to our long association with bodily relationships, bereavement on account of the annihilation of friends and relatives is not at all astonishing. But one has to learn the art of subduing such bereavement with higher transcendental knowledge. Prabhupada. What's he doing? What's he saying? The talks between Uddhava and Vidura on the topic of Krishna began at sunset. And Vidura was now further advanced in knowledge due to his association with Uddhava. 24. While Uddhava the chief and most confidential amongst the devotees of the Lord, was going away, Vidura, in affection and confidence, questioned him. Purport. Vidura was much older than Uddhava. By family relationship, Uddhava was a contemporary brother of Krishna's, while Vidura was as elderly as Krishna's father, Vasudeva. But although junior by age, Uddhava was much advanced in the devotional service of the Lord, and therefore he is described herein as the chief amongst the devotees of the Lord. Vidura was confident about this, and thus he addressed Uddhava in that higher category. That is the way of courteous dealings between two devotees. Text 25. Vidura said, O Uddhava, because the servants of Vishnu, the Lord, wander in the interest of serving others, it is quite fit that you kindly describe the self-knowledge with which you have been enlightened by the Lord himself. Purport. The servants of the Lord are actually the servants of society. I think I'll repeat that one again. Where have I heard that before? Sounds familiar. I heard that not too long ago. The servants of the Lord are actually the servants of society. They have no interest in human society other than to enlighten it in transcendental knowledge. They are interested in imparting knowledge of the relationship of the living being with the Supreme Lord, the activities in that transcendental relationship, and the ultimate goal of human life. That is the real knowledge which can help society achieve the real aim of human life, of human welfare. Knowledge in the matter of the bodily necessities, of eating, mating, and fearing, transformed into various branches of advancement of knowledge, is all temporary. A living being is not the material body, but an eternal part and parcel of the Supreme Being. And thus revival of his self-knowledge is essential. Where have I heard that word revival before? It seems I've heard that somewhere before. Excuse me. We were having a discussion, the preachers that we've been associating with tonight, and some of the things that we're hearing here are exactly what we were talking about, and it's overwhelming me a little bit with transcendental emotion, so you have to just be patient with me for a couple of minutes here. I got to read this again. This is too much. The servants of the Lord are actually the servants of society. They have no interest in human society other than to enlighten it in transcendental knowledge. They are interested in imparting knowledge of the relationship of a living being with the Supreme Lord, the activities in that transcendental relationship, and the ultimate goal of human life. That is the real knowledge which can help society achieve the real aim of human welfare. Knowledge in the matter of the bodily necessities of eating, sleeping, mating, and fearing, transformed into various branches of advancement of knowledge, is all temporary. A living being is not the material body, but an eternal part and parcel of the Supreme Being, and thus revival of his self-knowledge is essential. Without this knowledge, the human life is baffled. The servants of the Lord, Vishnu, are entrusted with this responsible work, and so they wander over the earth and to all other planets in the universe. Thus the knowledge which was received by Uddhava directly from the Lord deserves to be distributed in human society, especially to persons like Vidura, who are highly advanced in the devotional service of the Lord. Real transcendental knowledge descends in the disciplic succession from the Lord to Uddhava, from Uddhava to Vidura, and so on. Such supreme transcendental knowledge is not possible to achieve by the process of imperfect speculation, as performed by the so-called learned mundane wranglers. Vidura was anxious to know from Uddhava that confidential knowledge known as Paramam Stitim, in which the Lord is known by his transcendental pastimes. Although Vidura was older than Uddhava, he was anxious to become a servant of Uddhava. In the transcendental relationship, this formula of transcendental disciplic succession is taught by Lord Chaitanya also. Lord Chaitanya advises that one receive transcendental knowledge from anyone, whether a brahmana or a shudra, a householder or a sannyasi, provided that that person is factually conversant with the science of Krishna. A person who knows the science of Krishna is factually a bona fide spiritual master. Where have I heard that before? Prabhupada said that we need thousands of spiritual masters on the earth to turn it around. And he gave the instruction to everybody to do that. Text 26. Sri Uddhava said, "You may take lessons from the great learned sage Maitreya, who was nearby and who was worshipable for reception of transcendental knowledge. He was directly instructed by the personality of Godhead while the latter was about to quit this mortal world." Purport. Although one may be well versed in the transcendental science, one should be very careful about the offense of Maryada Vyatikrama, or impertinently surpassing a greater personality. According to scriptural injunction, one should be very careful of transgressing the law of Maryada Vyatikrama, because by so doing, one loses his duration of life, his opulence, fame, and piety, and the blessings of all the world. To be well versed in the transcendental science necessitates awareness of the techniques of spiritual science. Uddhava, being well aware of all these technicalities of transcendental science, advised Vidura to approach Maitreya Rishi to receive transcendental knowledge. Vidura wanted to accept Uddhava as a spiritual master. But Uddhava did not accept the post because Vidura was as old as Uddhava's father, and therefore Uddhava could not accept him as his disciple, especially when Maitreya was present nearby. The rule is that in the presence of a higher personality, one should not be very eager to impart instructions, even if one is competent and well-versed. So Uddhava decided to send an elderly person like Vidura to Maitreya, another elderly person, but one who was also well-versed because he was directly instructed by the Lord while the Lord was about to quit this mortal world. Since both Uddhava and Maitreya were directly instructed by the Lord, both had the authority to become the spiritual master of Vidura or anyone else. But Maitreya, being elderly, had the first claim to becoming the spiritual master, especially for Vidura, who was much older than Uddhava. One should not be eager to become a spiritual master cheaply for the sake of profit and fame, but should become a spiritual master only for the service of the Lord. The Lord never tolerates the impertinence of Maryada Vyatikrama. One should never pass over the honor due an elderly spiritual master in the interests of one's own personal gain and fame. Impertinence on the part of the pseudo-spiritual master is very risky to progressive spiritual realization. Text 27. I would like to make a comment on that statement, if I may, with the permission of the assembled sages. I think that this is very pertinent to the discussion we were having today earlier, because it's a fact that Srila Prabhupada is the founder Acharya of ISKCON, and therefore the senior instructor and the spiritual master of all of us. That doesn't mean that we can take initiation from him, posthumously. That's not in the Vedas. But we should avoid this Vyatikrama, Maryada Vyatikrama, in the sense that his books are actually the most profound teachings that we have, and all of us are getting our knowledge from here. Even those of us who initiate disciples or becoming old ourselves. I'm 72 now. So the revival of the taste of reading Srila Prabhupada's books and getting the basics of spiritual life, the principles, as it's put here in this purport, the technicalities of the science, philosophy of Krishna, how to behave, how to be, how to act as a spiritual being, not just how to know something, is extremely important. Especially at this moment in time. Always, but especially in this moment in time. It's time for revival of the taste of reading Srila Prabhupada's books and putting Prabhupada in the center by putting his books in the center. Text 27. Shukadeva Goswami said, O king, after thus discussing with Vidura the Lord's transcendental name, fame, qualities, etc., on the bank of the Jamuna, Uddhava was overwhelmed with great affliction. He passed the night as if it were a moment, and thereafter he went away. Purport. The word used here for Krishna is Vishwamurti. Both Uddhava and Vidura were in great affliction because of Lord Krishna's departure, and the more they discussed the transcendental name, fame, and qualities of the Lord, the more the picture of the Lord became visible to them everywhere. Such visualization of the transcendental form of the Lord is neither false nor imaginary, but is factual, absolute truth. When the Lord is perceived as Vishwamurti, it is not that he loses his personality or transcendental eternal form, but he becomes visible in the same form everywhere. Text 28. The king inquired, at the end of the pastimes of the Lord of the three worlds, Lord Sri Krishna, and after the disappearance of the members of the Vrishni and Bhoja dynasties, who were the best of all the commanders, why did Uddhava alone remain? Purport. According to Sri Jiva Goswami, Nidanam means the transcendental abode of the Lord. Ni means the highest, and Dhanam means opulence. And because the abode of the Lord is the highest manifestation of transcendental opulence, his abode can therefore be called Nidanam. Apart from the grammatical elucidation, The real purpose of the word Nidanam is to indicate that all the members of the Vrishni and Bhoja dynasties were direct associates of the Lord, and after the end of his pastimes, all the associates were dispatched to their respective positions in the transcendental abode. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur elucidates the meaning of akritim as pastimes. Ah means complete, and kritim means transcendental pastimes. Since the Lord is identical with his transcendental body, there is no question of his changing or quitting his body. To act in accordance with the rules and customs of the material world, the Lord seems to take his birth and leave his body. But the pure devotees of the Lord know well the actual fact. It is necessary, therefore, for the serious students of Srimad-Bhagavatam to follow the notes and comments of the great acharyas like Jiva Goswami and Vishwanath Chakravarti. So I'd like to point out that Prabhupada is following these commentaries and putting the essence of those commentaries in his purports. To others who are not devotees of the Lord, the comments and explanations of such acharyas may appear to be grammatical jugglery. But to the students who are in the line of disciplic succession, the explanations of the great acharyas are quite fit. The word upageteshu is also significant. All the members of Vrishni and Bhoja directly reached the abode of the Lord. Other devotees do not reach the abode of the Lord directly, but the pure associates of the Lord have no attraction for the opulence of any planets in the material world. Sometimes, due to inquisitiveness, devotees who are to be promoted to the abode of the Lord have some attraction for the opulence of the higher material planets above the earth, and thus they desire to see them while going up to the perfection. But the Vrishnis and Bhojas were directly dispatched because they had no attraction for material planets. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also suggests that according to the Amara Kosha dictionary, akriti also means signal. Lord Krishna ordered Uddhava by signal to go to Bhadraka after the Lord's departure, and Uddhava, as a pure devotee of the Lord, carried out the order faithfully instead of going back to Godhead or the abode of the Lord. That was the cause of his remaining alone even after the departure of the Lord from the face of the earth. So you remember, we just read a few verses ago that he admitted that he went there by the instruction of the Lord. That's called a signal, the instruction of the Lord. Text 29. Shukadeva Goswami replied, "My dear king, the cursing of the Brahmanas was only a plea, but the actual fact was the supreme desire of the Lord. He wanted to disappear from the face of the earth after dispatching his excessively numerous family members. He thought to himself as follows." Purport. By the word purport is missing. Matt, can you make a note? The word purport is missing in this database. We're finding that sometimes when the texts are transferred over to the different software that's used to make the folio, sometimes things get missing or something. Last night we found one verse which was in the wrong place. Yeah, but not in the book. It was okay in the book. It's just in the database. These kind of things tend to happen. So I'm helping Dravida to correct the database. In this verse, the word tyakshan is very significant in relation to Lord Sri Krishna's leaving his body. Since he is the eternal form of existence, knowledge and bliss, his body and his self are identical. Therefore, how is it possible that he would leave his body and then disappear from the vision of the world. There is a great controversy amongst the non-devotees, or Mayavadis, about the mysterious disappearance of the Lord. And the doubts of those men with a poor fund of knowledge have been very elaborately cleared by Srila Jiva Goswami in his Krishna Sandarbha. According to the Brahma Samhita, the Lord has many forms. It is stated therein that the Lord has innumerable forms, and when he appears within the vision of the living entities, as Lord Krishna actually appeared, all such forms amalgamate with him. Besides all these infallible forms, he has his universal form, as manifested before Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Here in this verse, the word spitam is also used, which indicates that he left his gigantic universal form, called the Virat Rupa, not his primeval, eternal form, because there is hardly any possibility of his changing his form of Satchidananda. This simple understanding is at once realized by the devotees of the Lord. But those who are non-devotees, who perform hardly any devotional service to the Lord, either do not understand this simple fact, or purposefully raise a controversy to defeat the eternity of the transcendental body of the Lord. This is due to the defect called the cheating propensity of the imperfect living entities. By practical experience also, it is seen up to the present day that the Lord's transcendental form is worshipped by devotees in different temples, and all the devotees of the Lord factually realize that the form of the deity in the temple is non-different from the form of the Lord. This inconceivable performance of the internal potency of the Lord is described in the Bhagavad Gita, Naham Prakasha Sarvasya, Yogamaya Samavritaha. The Lord reserves the right of not being exposed to everyone. In the Padma Purana, it is said, Atak Sri Krishna Namadi, Nabhaved Grayam Indriyahi. The name and form of the Lord cannot be perceived by the material senses, but when he appears within the vision of the mundane people, he assumes the form of the Virat Rupa. This is an additional material exhibition of form, and is supported by the logic of a subject and its adjectives. In grammar, when an adjective is taken away from the subject it modifies does not change. Similarly, when the Lord quits his Virat Rupa, his eternal form does not change, although there is no material difference between himself and any one of his innumerable forms. In the 5th canto, it will be seen how the Lord is worshipped in different planets in his different forms, even now, and how he is worshipped in different temples of this earth also. Srila Jiva Goswami and Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur have very elaborately explained this incident of the Lord's disappearance in their commentaries, quoting various authentic versions of Vedic literatures. We purposely do not include them all here to avoid an increase in the volume of this book. The entire matter is explained in the Bhagavad Gita as quoted above. The Lord reserves the right of not being exposed to everyone. He always keeps himself out of the vision of the non-devotees who are devoid of love and devotion, and thus he puts them still further away from the Lord. The Lord appeared on the invitation of Brahma, who prayed before the Chirodakashayi Vishnu, and therefore when the Lord appeared, all the forms of Vishnu amalgamated with him, and when the mission was fulfilled, all of them separated from him in the usual course. Text 30. So now remember, that's a long purport. We'll remember the verse, what it said just before. He wanted to disappear from the face of the earth after dispatching his excessively numerous family members. He thought to himself as follows. So now we're going to hear what the Lord thought. Text 30. Now I shall leave the vision of this mundane world, and I see that Uddhava, the foremost of my devotees, is the only one who can be directly entrusted with knowledge about me. Purport. Jnanam madashrayam is significant in this verse. Transcendental knowledge has three departmental divisions, namely knowledge of impersonal Brahman, knowledge of the all-pervading Supersoul, and knowledge of the personality of Godhead. Out of the three, transcendental knowledge of the personality of Godhead has special significance and is known as Bhagavat Tattva Vijnana, specific knowledge of the personality of Godhead. This specific knowledge is realized by pure devotional service and no other means. The Bhagavad Gita confirms this. Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavanyascha tattvataha. Only persons engaged in devotional service can factually know the transcendental position of the Lord. Uddhava was considered to be the best amongst all devotees of that time, and therefore by the Lord's grace he received direct instruction from the Lord so that people might take advantage of Uddhava's knowledge after the disappearance of the Lord from the vision of the world. This is one of the reasons why Uddhava was advised to go to Badarikashram, where the Lord is personally represented by the Narayana deity. One who is transcendentally advanced can gain direct inspiration from the temple deity, and thus a devotee of the Lord always takes shelter of a recognized temple of the Lord in order to make tangible advancement in transcendental knowledge by the grace of the Lord. Another reason why we came back. Text 31. Uddhava is not inferior to me in any way because he is never affected by the modes of material nature. Therefore, he may remain in this world in order to disseminate specific knowledge of the personality of Godhead. Purport. The specific qualification for becoming the representative of the Lord is to be unaffected by the material modes of nature. The highest qualification of a person in the material world is to be a Brahmana. But since a Brahmana is in the mode of goodness, to be a Brahmana is not sufficient for becoming a representative of the Lord. One has to transcend the mode of goodness also and be situated in unalloyed goodness, unaffected by any of the qualities of material nature. This stage of transcendental qualification is called Shuddhasattva or Vasudeva, and in this stage the science of God can be realized. As the Lord is not affected by the modes of material nature, so a pure devotee of the Lord is also not affected by the modes of nature. That is the primary qualification for being one with the Lord. A person who is able to attain this transcendental qualification is called a Jivan Mukta, or a liberated person, even though apparently in material conditions. This liberation is achieved by one who constantly engages in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu it is stated, Iha yasya harer dasye karmana manasa gira nikila swapyavastasu jivan mukta sa uchite. Anyone who, by his actions, mind, and words, lives only for the transcendental loving service of the Lord is certainly a liberated soul, even though he may appear to be in a condition of material existence. Uddhava was in such a transcendental position, and thus he was selected to be the factual representative of the Lord in the Lord's bodily absence from the vision of the world. Such a devotee of the Lord is never affected by material strength, intelligence, or even renunciation. Such a devotee of the Lord can withstand all onslaughts of the material nature and therefore he is known as Goswami. Only such Goswamis can penetrate the mysteries of the Lord's transcendental loving relationships. Text 32. Shukadeva Goswami informed the king that Uddhava, being thus instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the source of all Vedic knowledge and the spiritual master of the three worlds, reached the pilgrimage site of Badrikashram and engaged himself there in trance to satisfy the Lord. Purport. Lord Sri Krishna is factually the spiritual master of the three worlds, and he is the original source of all Vedic knowledge. It is very difficult, however, to understand the personal feature of the Absolute Truth, even from the Vedas. His personal instructions are needed in order to understand the personality of Godhead as the Supreme Absolute Truth. The Bhagavad Gita is the evidence of such transcendental knowledge in gist. One cannot know the Supreme Lord unless one is graced by the Lord himself. Lord Krishna exhibited this specific mercy towards Arjuna and Uddhava while he was in the material world. Undoubtedly, the Bhagavad Gita was spoken by the Lord on the battlefield of Kurukshetra just to encourage Arjuna to fight. And yet, to complete the transcendental knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord instructed Uddhava. Uddhava Gita, 11th canto. Sometimes I hear that devotees don't read it because they think, well, Prabhupada translated up to this point, so everything else is not proper, so we'll just turn around and go back. This is a huge mistake. Anybody who's read the 11th canto carefully in the association of other devotees, which we did, by the way, 2 years ago, we read all the way through the 11th and the 12th cantos in Govardhan during the retreat, the Vrat. And it was so ecstatic. We were all swimming in ecstasy. And now we hear why. Because to complete the transcendental knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord instructed Uddhava. The Lord wanted Uddhava to fulfill the Lord's mission and disseminate knowledge which he had not spoken even in the Bhagavad Gita. Persons who are attached to the words of the Vedas may also know from this verse that the Lord is the source of all Vedic knowledge. One who is unable to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead by going through the pages of the Vedas may take shelter of one of the Lord's devotees, such as Uddhava, in order to advance further in knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Brahma Samhita says that it is very difficult to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead from the Vedas, but that he is easily understood from a pure devotee like Uddhava. The Lord, taking mercy on the sages who lived in Badrikashram, authorized Uddhava to speak on his behalf. Unless one has such authorization, one cannot understand or preach the devotional service of the Lord. While present on this earth, the Lord executed many uncommon activities, even traveling in space to bring down the Parijata from heaven and recovering the son of his teacher, Sandipani Muni, from the regions of death. Do you know who that person was?
Sandipani Muni's son?
Yeah. Marumangal. Uddhava was certainly informed of the conditions of life on other planets, and all the sages were anxious to know of them, just as we are anxious to know about the planets in space. Uddhava was particularly deputed to carry messages to Badrikashram, not only to the sages of that place of pilgrimage, but also to the Narayan deities. Whoa. Such messages must have been more confidential than the knowledge described in the pages of the Vedas. What that was the knowledge of Braj Bhakti. And that's why Krishna sent Uddhava to Braj, to see it for himself, so he actually knew it. The Lord is undoubtedly the source of all knowledge, and the messages dispatched through Uddhava to Narayan and the other sages were also part of the Vedic knowledge, but those messages were more confidential and could be sent and understood only through such a pure devotee as Uddhava. Since such confidential knowledge was known only to the Lord and Uddhava, it is said that Uddhava was as good as the Lord himself. Every living entity can, I'll repeat that, every living entity can, like Uddhava, become a confidential messenger on the same level as the Lord, provided he becomes confidential himself by dint of loving devotional service. The Bhagavad Gita confirms that such confidential knowledge is entrusted only to pure devotees like Uddhava and Arjuna, and that one has to learn the mystery through them and not otherwise. One cannot understand the Bhagavad Gita or Srimad-Bhagavatam without the help of such confidential devotees of the Lord. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, those confidential messages must have concerned the mystery of the Lord's departure and the annihilation of his dynasty after the end of his appearance in the mundane world for 100 years. Everyone must have been very anxious to know about the mystery of the annihilation of the Yadu dynasty, and that message must have been explained by the Lord to Uddhava and dispatched to Badrikashram for the information of Narayana and other pure devotees of the Lord. Text 33. Vidura also heard from Uddhava about the appearance and disappearance of Lord Krishna, the Supersoul, in the mortal world, which is a subject matter sought after with great perseverance by the great sages. Purport. The subject matter of the appearance and disappearance of the Supersoul, Lord Sri Krishna, is a mystery even for the great sages. The word Paramatmana is significant in this verse. An ordinary living being is generally called the Atma, but Lord Krishna is never an ordinary living being because he is the Paramatma, the Supersoul. Yet his appearance as one of the human beings and his disappearance again from the mortal world are subject matters for the research workers who execute research work with great perseverance. Such subject matters are certainly of increasing interest because the researchers have to search out the transcendental abode of the Lord, which he enters after finishing his pastimes in the mortal world. But even the great sages have no information that beyond the material sky is the spiritual sky, where Sri Krishna eternally resides with his associates, although at the same time he exhibits his pastimes in the mortal world in all the universes, one after another. This fact is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita, Goloka Eva Nivasat Jagilatma Bhutaha. The Lord, by his inconceivable potency, resides in his eternal abode Goloka, yet at the same time, as the Supersoul, he is present everywhere, in both the spiritual and material skies, in his multi-varieties of manifestation. Therefore his appearance and disappearance are simultaneously going on, and no one can say definitely which of them is the beginning and which is the end. His eternal pastimes have no beginning or end, and one has to learn of them from the pure devotee only, and not waste valuable time in so-called research work. Text 34. The Lord's glorious acts and His apparent acceptance of various transcendental forms for the performance of extraordinary pastimes in the mortal world are very difficult for anyone other than His devotees to understand. And for the beasts, they are simply a mental disturbance. Purport. The transcendental forms and pastimes of the Lord, as described in the Bhagavad Gita, are difficult subject matters for those who are not devotees to understand. The Lord never reveals Himself to persons like the Jnanis and Yogis. And there are others who, because of their envying the Lord from the bottom of their hearts, are classified among the beasts. And for such envious beasts, the subject matter of the Lord's appearance and disappearance is simply a mental disturbance. As confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, the miscreants who are simply concerned with material enjoyment, who work very hard like beasts of burden, can hardly know the personality of Godhead at any stage due to asurika bhava, or a spirit of revolt against the Supreme Lord. The transcendental bodily expansions manifested by the Lord for His pastimes in the mortal world, and the appearance and disappearance of such transcendental expansions are difficult subject matters, and those who are not devotees are advised not to discuss the Lord's appearance and disappearance, lest they commit further offenses at the lotus feet of the Lord. The more they discuss the transcendental appearance and disappearance of the Lord in the asuric spirit, the more they enter into the darkest region of hell. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, anyone who is against the transcendental loving service of the Lord is more or less a beastly creature, as confirmed in this verse of Srimad-Bhagavatam. We'll stop the reading for tonight there. Hare Krishna. And we'll turn to our reflection time. Anything that stuck in your mind, and there's a lot of things that stuck in our minds from this reading. It's so deep.
There's several things, but I think the one that's come...
Radharaman, the sage from the cave in Hive on the beach, is giving his reflection. Go ahead.
There's several things, and no doubt others will bring others of them up.
There are several things, and no doubt others will bring other things up, but he's going to...
But the thing that actually stuck in my mind the most, I'm just trying to find it, but I'll paraphrase it, is talk about how the devotee will actually take shelter of the form of the deity in the temple.
He's bringing out the point that was brought out, that the advanced devotee of the Lord will take shelter of the form of the deity in the temple.
And get inspiration from that,
and get inspiration from that. And
just wondering if you could make any further comment on that, Maharaj?
I'm waiting for the comments from you. Come on. Well, it is said that the neophyte devotees are very attached to worshiping the deity in the temple. And they become pure devotees by doing that. But when they're beginners, they have faith in the deity, but they don't, because they're not purified enough yet. They don't have faith that Krishna is in the heart of the living beings, and therefore they don't know how to properly treat other devotees, particularly, and other living beings. So therefore, they worship the deity, and it helps them. But unless they can come from that platform, they're meant to come from the platform of Kanishta to the Madhyamadikari. I heard Gopi Pranadana Prabhu say something very wonderful the other day. He said that the Kanishta serves out of fear, and the Madhyamadikari serves out of duty and gratitude, and the Uttamadikari serves out of love. So the persons who are worshipping the deities, in the beginning, they will serve out of fear, because if we don't, if we make a mistake in front of the deity, then something bad's going to happen to us, or something like that, make an offense. And then when they advance from doing that, and they begin to associate with more elevated devotees and begin to serve properly, then they come to the madhyam state, and then they treat the Lord, they love the Lord, and they make friends with devotees, and they're compassionate, which means they preach, or they try to help others come to Krishna consciousness. And the asuras they avoid. These persons who discussed here about how they become disturbed when they see the Lord being worshipped in the temple. When they hear about the Lord's position, they become disturbed, and they avoid them. And then I heard Gopi also say that, well, we've all heard that sometimes the Uttamadikari, who becomes so advanced that he sees the Lord, the deity in the temple, the deity in the temple, as Krishna himself, non-different, then love comes out, and he starts to serve the devotee with love. And that person is in another category of devotee. One time in Vrindavan, I think it was 1976, when all the Radha Damodar traveling brahmacharis went, and they were in Prabhupada's room in Vrindavan. One of them asked Prabhupada what was the most intimate service, and they all expected him to say book distribution, because they were all like gung-ho book distributors, and Prabhupada said pujari. Blew everyone's mind completely. But normally he would always emphasize the book distribution over anything else, because his books are, we're experiencing it tonight, hearing these purports. They're so wonderful, so deep, and they're actually enlightening us and enlightening everyone. But here, because he detected that the book distributors were proud, they were proud, and they thought their service was better than anything else, Prabhupada just cut down their pride by telling them, the pujari is the most intimate, because when you're in the spiritual world, there's no book distribution going on there, because everyone's a devotee, You don't have to make devotees, because everyone there is a devotee, so worshipping the deities in the temple, the conclusion I would come to from all of this is that it's extremely important for everyone, from the neophytes, for the medium devotees, and for the advanced devotees. It's just that they're in a different state of consciousness when they're worshipping the deities. But in each case, they should be attached to worshipping the deities. In the beginning out of fear, later on out of duty and gratitude, and then finally out of love, when they realize that the deity is Krishna. And the same thing goes for the holy name of the Lord. The goal is to realize that the holy name is Krishna. And that's why we read this prayer to the Bhagavatam by Sanatana Goswami, in which we realize that the Bhagavatam is Krishna himself. So if we take shelter of all these different aspects of Krishna fully, then we become capable of giving Krishna consciousness to others, to the extent that we have done that, and empowered to make others Krishna conscious.
It reminds me of that.
Radharamana is saying that reminds him of
That time you were telling me about in Hungary a few years ago.
time I was telling him about Hungary a few years ago.
About Vaisheshika Prabhu.
About Vaisheshika Prabhu.
When he visited there for the first time.
When he visited there for the first time.
All the residents of New Braj
All the residents of New Brajadam
were completely blown away by him.
were blown away by him. It was true.
Said, we've never had a guest like this before.
We've never had a guest like this before.
Because he was so enthusiastic to do everything.
Because he was so enthusiastic to do everything and about everything. Yeah, I remember that. I was there. I watched him. He was so interested in every single aspect of the farm, every single aspect of the cultivation, the artistic things, the deities, the book distribution. He went to go down to the books, and he was like, fondling each book as if it was a deity. It was like, what amazing. Yes, Bhakti Matt.
We have a question
We have a question from the cyberspace from Rati Manjari, who is in Holland, I think Amsterdam. Haribol Rati, miss you, Hare Krishna.
She says, "Dear Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. In the purport, it was mentioned that there are 4 places on earth where the kingdom of God by Vaikuntha is revealed, namely Badaragashram, Harbour, I believe, Dwarka, and Jagannath Puri. Thank you for explaining why Vrindavan and Mayapur Dham were not mentioned among them, namely because they are Golok, Vrindavan, and beyond Vaikuntha. So here's the question. If Jagannath Puri is Vaikuntha, why did Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stay there for so many years? Why did he, for example, not spend more time in Sri Vrindavan Dham?
Because his mother asked him to. And you have to do what your mother says. There's more esoteric reasons even, because Jagannath Puri is a unique place. It's considered to be both in the mood of Dwarka and Vrindavan. The Jagannath temple is in the mood of Dwarka, and this is what the Dola Yatra is about every year in Jagannath Puri. They worship the Dola Yatra, and after Krishna goes to Vrindavan, which is represented by the Gundicha, Gundicha Mandir, and Lord Jagannath goes there to be with Radharani, and then the goddess of fortune starts to get a little jealous, and she comes with all of her entourage to get Krishna and bring him back to, and that's what the return Rath is about. So both moods are there, and when Lord Chaitanya was there, because he was in the mood of Radharani, he would sometimes dance in front of the cart and sing all these wonderful prayers, and Rupa Goswami could understand what he was saying, but most people couldn't. But anyway, Srup Damodar and Srivas Thakur represents Narada Muni, or is an incarnation of Narada Muni, and Srup Damodar is an incarnation, or represents Lalita in this Vrindavan. So they had this debate about, who was more powerful, the goddess of fortune or Radharani, or what was more opulent, Dwarka or Vrindavan. And obviously, Swarup Damodar won the debate. So when Gopakumar went to Jagannath Puri, he came from Vrindavan, and he was a young cowherd boy, and he was learning about the devotional service of the Lord. As he traveled around, he got the blessings of the spiritual master to be enlightened as he traveled around. And he came to Jagannath Puri and worshipped Jagannath Krishna, not as the Lord of Vaikuntha or Lord of Dwarka, but as Krishna. He saw him as did Lord Chaitanya, saw him as Krishna playing flute in Vrindavan. So at one point he saw that the king was able to go inside and do all these intimate services with. That'd be really nice. I'd really like to do that. And then what happened? The king, something happened. Did the king die? And the brother of the king refused because he wanted to stay a mendicant. And so Jagannath gave a message to the pujaris that Gopakumar should be made the king. So he, for some time, became the king. And he was able to go in and do all these services for the deity. But then, along with that, came all these responsibilities for managing the temple and the kingdom. And he kind of got disturbed. And then he decided he kind of wanted to move on. And then Lord Jagannath came to him and said, look, this place is very intimate, one of my favorite places, but I'm pleased even more by those who serve in Mathura, in Vrindavan. So you should go back there. So it's a very mysterious place, Jagannath Puri. It's got all these different moods and things mixed. So anyway, so there are different reasons why Lord Chaitanya went to Jagannath Puri instead of staying in Vrindavan. But the main one was the order of his mother. Because when he took sannyas, and he first thing he wanted to do was go to Vrindavan. So he was on his way, and we all know the story. Lord Nityananda told the cowherd boys on the bank of the Ganga, when Lord Chaitanya came there in ecstasy, not knowing which way to go, that they should direct him back towards Navadvip. So they did that. And then, Advaita Acharya met him there with a boat, and Lord Chaitanya said, what are you doing here? And there was a whole pastime. And then Lord Chaitanya said, Lord Nityananda tricked me. What am I doing here? I'm not supposed to be here. I want to go to Vrindavan. And then, anyway, they said, okay, just get in the boat and we'll go. So they took him to Advaita Acharya's house. And then they went. Advaita Acharya sent the devotees to get Mother Sachi. And Mother Sachi came to see Lord Chaitanya for the last time, physically. And when she saw Lord Chaitanya, she broke out in tears, and because she shaved head, and he was... So then Lord Chaitanya came and fell at her feet. And he said, Ma, this body belongs to you. It came from you. Therefore, I belong to you. So whatever you want me to do, I'll do. You want me to give up sannyas and come back home? I'll do it. And Sachi Devi said, no, that's not possible. It would be so embarrassing. I mean, your reputation would be ruined. I can't do that. So then she said, okay, so you've done it, it's done, can't change it, but I ask you to make your headquarters in Jagannath Puri. because there, people come from back and forth from here and there a lot, and I can hear about your activities and pastimes, and therefore I can feel close to you. And Lord Chaitanya said, so be it.
Thank you very much for that operation, dear Guru Maharaj. It's truly enlightening.
Hare Krishna. Thanks for the question. Doyle Moore has something.
In one of the verses, Vidura is described as pacifying his overwhelming bereavement by dint of his transcendental knowledge.
Ooh, this is a really nice point. He's pointing out where it's described how Vidura was overwhelmed by the bereavement of remembering of Krishna's disappearance and all the disappearance of all of these wonderful. But he was able to overcome it with transcendental knowledge. Go ahead.
Can you speak a little bit about how we can apply this principle of transcendental knowledge, using it to deal with distresses that may come in our lives or difficulties that we have?
I think that it's transparent, it's self-evident. You know, that when we face perplexities by being in the material world, no matter who we are, no matter what is going on. I mean, just look at Prabhupada's life. You know, who could be more advanced than Prabhupada? Who could be more fixed than Prabhupada? And yet he had disasters happen to him, one after another, after another, after another. You know? And so, what was it that drove him? What was it that allowed him to overcome all those I mean, anybody else would have quit many times. You know, he wrote the commentary to the Bhagavad Gita, more than 1,000 pages, and it was stolen. When he came, you know, up to, you know, Boston Harbor, and he just looked at the billboards and the skyline, he said, "Oh my God, how are these people going to understand, you know, Krishna, Radha and Krishna, and Lord Chaitanya?" And then he thought, "I'm going to go there, and I'm going to tell them they should stop eating meat and having illicit sex and gambling and taking intoxication, and they're going to tell me, okay, now you have to go home." I mean, anyway, we all know more or less different things about his pastimes that were just unbelievable. What did he do? He heard the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He took shelter of the Lord. He was absorbed in the mission of his spiritual master. He was absorbed in the mission of his spiritual master. That's the key for us. We're not so elevated as, you know, Uddhava and Vidura, who are, you know, personal associates of the Lord. You know, I mean, Krishna thought, I mean, we're going to hear now, we're just going to hear how Uddhava became overwhelmed. I mean, Vidura became overwhelmed when he found out that Krishna thought of him as he left the world. So, that is very important. Because, you know, when we actually take shelter of Krishna, in other words, when we're in trouble, when we're having difficulties, we're in anxiety and there's some impediment, you know, if we, at that time, if we run to Krishna, just like, you know, you're walking out there and all of a sudden a downpour comes, I mean a really heavy downpour, you know, you just run to the nearest tree or the nearest overhang to get out of that downpour, you know. That's what it means to take shelter. So we learn that art and actually take shelter of Krishna when we're really in a state of bewilderment or anxiety or agitation, then we get relief. If we do that, we get relief every time. It's infallible. And if we don't do it and then think that the Krishna consciousness doesn't work, and so we'll go away, then we don't understand. We haven't actually learned what it means to take shelter. So I think that if we learn this art, and it doesn't make any difference who we are, whether we're grahastas, or we're sannyasis, or we're brahmacharis, or we're new bhaktas, or we're, whatever we are, if we learn this art, we will be protected at all times, and we will be able to absorb ourselves in the mission of our spiritual master. And for all of us, that's Prabhupada's mission. That's Lord Chaitanya's mission. If somebody's got some other idea, some other mission, then we're not interested. That should be our litmus test, And Prabhupada's mission was very broad. It's not just book distribution, or just deity worship, or just this or just that. It was broad. It included everything, because he was trying to, purify the world by engaging everything in the Sankirtan movement. But within that context, his books were extremely important to him. That's why I wrote that offering. And I researched through the whole Bhagavatam to get quotes from that offering. To make sure that it was a balanced approach, that it was over all the years he was here, that it was all the, things that he said in the books and in his lectures and in his instructions even to his devotees. There's one that just came out of my mind very clearly about, I got it from Kurma's book, the great transcendental adventure when Prabhupada was in Australia. And there was one evening when there was some controversy going on, and devotees were arguing back and forth about something. And Prabhupada we got one of his books out, and he had the devotee read from his book. And as the devotee read from his book, everybody felt, the cloud lift, and everybody became light. And then after everybody became satisfied, and they had a nice question and answer session, and then afterwards Prabhupada had I guess it was an appointment with a young Indian boy, and just life went on. So, but the principle, whether it's you go to your bead bag, I remember in time, it was either in LA or San Francisco, he said, and I haven't found this, I don't think it was recorded, this was a kind of like an off-the-cuff moment, and he was chanting on it, he had his beads in his hand, and he was sitting and he had his beads up against his knee, and he was chanting like this, and then he said, so, you should all become very attached to chanting on your beads, because you may find sometime in the future there won't be these kinds of facilities you have now, and you may find yourself alone somewhere, and you may have to start the Krishna consciousness movement yourself. And you'll only have your beads. You'll only have the Maha Mantra. Everybody was like, So he didn't say, be a Bhajananandi and go into the forest and just chant. And then you'll have to start the Krishna consciousness movement by yourself through the strength of your... That's what he was saying, basically. It was like Prahlad Maharaj, one of the verses he said to Lord Nrsingadev, I'm okay, I can think of you any time. But look at these people, they're going to hell, and we have to help them. And of course Vasudeva Datta, came to Lord Chaitanya and told him, "My Lord, I only have one request." He said, "I can't stand it anymore, seeing all these people suffering, so please deliver them. And if you think that the reactions to their sins have to be, paid for, leave me here, and I'll pay for all the sins of all the living beings in the universe, and take them home. And I'll stay and, pay for them." Lord Chaitanya started to cry. He said, "Your desire is so pure, it's already done." Then later Lord Chaitanya went to Haridas Thakur in Jagannath Puri, and he said to Haridas, "How are these living entities going to get delivered?" And Haridas just told him, "You already did it, don't you remember? When Vasudeva Datta asked you that, it's already done. Don't lament, don't feel anxiety." And then in purport, Prabhupada says, this is devotional service. This is service. To try to relieve the anxiety that Lord Chaitanya feels seeing the fallen conditioned soul suffering in this material world. That is service. So Prabhupada proved it. He just proved it by his, 2 heart attacks on the boat, another heart attack, fledgling society. Everybody thought that was it. And he just kept showing us how to take shelter. And then right at the end, I was there when he left. He just, Hare Krishna, he spoke right to the end practically. Only just a few hours was he, withdrawn. Jayadvaita Maharaj was there, you see the picture? He held the microphone up to his lips, and he couldn't barely speak. You could barely speak. And he gave these purports. And Jayadvaita Maharaj told me afterwards, they were so profound and they were so clear, there wasn't hardly any editing needed. And he never changed his message. He never, told people to go into near bhajan or do this. Right to the end, he was preaching the same thing. Then he said, just go on discussing Srimad-Bhagavatam among yourselves, and everything will remain clear. I heard it from his mouth to my ear.
Back in the last day? Or?
It wasn't the last day, but it was within the last week. And then later on, I found, that's in an offering I did, I think last year's offering, the year before. Then I read it. It's in one of Prabhupada's purports, one of the last purports. He says the same thing. So that's actually his last instruction to us, actually. That and to cooperate together. Those two things came pretty much in the same time. And this is what it means to cooperate together. To hear his books together and then cooperate, discuss them, get enlivened, get spiritually uplifted, enthused, and then to share it. That's it. That's the essence of the Krishna consciousness movement. Good point, sir. Thank you for the question.
Ronnie says, and that is what you were doing.
Oh, your love is blind, right? What can I say? You love me so much, you're losing your cool. Anyway, thanks. Everybody needs encouragement, so thanks for that. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to close shop for tonight. It's the end of our reflections and the reading of Srimad-Bhagavatam. It was wonderful. It was extraordinary. It's getting better and better, inconceivably better and better. And there's different devotees here almost every night, groups of different groups of devotees, and it just keeps getting better and better. I mean, as the old saying goes, what's not to like? Hare Krishna. Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna. Uddhava ki jai.